All right, so much buzz around this whole KYC thing with Pi Network, right?
Yeah.
Especially with this Banxa thing that's come up.
Yeah, seems like everyone's talking about it.
Exactly. So we've been digging through all the info, trying to make sense of it all. We've got stuff on the basics of KYC, how Pi Network originally approached it, and then, of course, this whole Banxa
A
collaboration.
lot to cover for sure.
It is. But our goal today, to cut through all the noise and give you the need-to-know stuff, the things that will actually help you understand this whole KYC process without getting lost in the weeds.
Sounds like a plan.
So first things first, why does Pi Network even need KYC in the first place?
Well, that's a great question to start with. KYC, or Know Your Customer, is really all about making sure the people on the network are, well, real people.
So basically confirming everyone's legit.
Exactly. And for Pi Network, this is super important for a few reasons. First off, it helps them fight fraud.
Fraud. Like how?
Well, by connecting each account to an actual person, they can crack down on bots.
Ah, those pesky bots.
Yeah, and also duplicate accounts, the ones trying to game the system and unfairly collect tons of Pi.
Right, so it's all about keeping the network authentic and fair for everyone.
Absolutely. Secondly, KYC helps to beef up the security of a whole Pi network ecosystem. When you know who's who, it adds a layer of trust and accountability. And it's not just about the internal network. It helps meet regulatory standards, too.
Oh, right, like legal stuff.
Yeah. A lot of countries have these anti-money laundering, AML, and counterterrorism financing, CTF rules. And these rules often require platforms dealing with cryptocurrencies to verify their users' identities.
Makes sense. So it's about keeping things above board and legal. But ultimately, the big goal is to actually let us use our Pi coins on the mainnet, right?
Exactly. KYC is like that essential step to unlock the full potential of the Pi Network mainnet. Once your identity is verified, you can really start engaging in transactions. You actually use those Pi coins you've been mining in the wider ecosystem. It's like the key to the whole thing.
So we know KYC is crucial. Now, how did Pi Network originally try to handle this whole thing? I remember something about community validators.
Yeah, their initial approach was pretty innovative, actually. They wanted to keep it decentralized and also cost-effective.
Yeah.
Their solution, tapping into the Pi Network community.
That's interesting. How did that work?
So the idea was that pioneers who had already completed their own KYC could become validators for others in their network. These validators would then review the submitted ID details and confirm they were legit.
So it was a system where the community itself was essentially responsible for verifying its members.
Exactly. The goal was to spread out the responsibility across the network. That way they wouldn't have to rely on a single central authority and could keep costs down. This approach really aligned with those core ideas of decentralization that are so important in the crypto world.
Sounds like a good idea in theory, but I also remember some issues cropping up. What were the biggest hurdles with this approach?
The biggest one, scaling. As Pi Network grew, really grew quickly, the number of people needing KYC just exploded. Yeah, millions of users.
Exactly. And while community validators were great for a smaller network, it just became a huge bottleneck. There were also inconsistencies with the speed of verification. It all depended on how many validators were available and how active they were.
So, great concept, but tough to keep up with that kind of growth.
Exactly. And that brings us to Banxa.
Right. So who is Banxa, and how are they now involved with Pi Network's KYC?
Banxa is a big name in the crypto world. They're a fiat-to-crypto gateway provider. Basically, they provide the infrastructure for people to buy and sell cryptocurrency using regular government-backed money.
So they bridge the gap between traditional finance and crypto.
Exactly. But importantly for us, they also offer KYC and identity verification services to different crypto platforms. And they've got a ton of experience handling KYC for large numbers of users across a bunch of platforms.
So they're kind of experts at this.
You could say that.
So what exactly is Banxa KYC on Pi Network? Are they replacing the community validation system altogether?
It's not a total replacement. It's more like an alternative. Okay, so it's another option for users.
Right. So you have the original community-driven KYC, and now you have this potentially faster route through Banxa.
Got it. So if someone chooses to go with Banxa, what's that process actually like?
Well, the exact steps might be slightly different depending on the Pi Network app's interface, but the general flow of Banxa KYC is pretty standard. You'll probably see an option to verify through Banxa in the KYC section of the app. If you choose that, you'll be asked to provide some personal details and upload the necessary documents for Banxa to do their checks.
What kind of documents are we talking about here?
Usually it's things like your government-issued photo ID passport, driver's license, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Banxa might also ask for something to confirm your address, like a recent utility bill or bank statement.
So pretty standard KYC stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. Once you upload everything, Banxa's systems and their review teams take over to verify everything.
Is it all automated, or do actual humans look at this stuff?
It's a mix. They use automated technology to analyze your documents, checking for authenticity and making sure everything meets KYC standards.
Mm-hmm.
But if there are any red flags or anything that needs a closer look, they have trained human reviewers who will step in and manually check everything. Once Banxa is done with their verification, they'll update your KYC status within the Pi network.
So it's like a more traditional, centralized approach compared to the community-based system.
Yeah, you could say that.
So why would someone choose to go the Banxa route? What are the benefits?
The biggest one is probably speed. Since Banxa does this kind of verification all the time, they have the infrastructure and resources to process things much faster. So the time it takes to get your KYC approved through Banxa could be way shorter than waiting for a community validator. And that's a big deal if you're eager to get on the mainnet.
So for people who want to get verified quickly, Banxa seems like the way to go. Any other advantages?
Yeah, there's also the efficiency factor. Banxa really specializes in this kind of verification. They've streamlined their process, which means fewer errors, fewer delays because of document issues, and just a smoother, more efficient experience overall.
Faster, more efficient. Sounds good. But I'm guessing there's a catch, right? What are the downsides of using Banxa KYC?
You're right, there are a couple of things to consider. The main one is cost. The original Pi Network KYC was basically free, or at least very low cost. But with Banxa, you usually have to pay a fee to complete the verification.
So that's the trade-off. Speed and efficiency come at a price.
Yep, and that can be a barrier for some users.
Right. What's the other potential downside?
The other thing to think about is centralization. Pi Network has always emphasized decentralization. But bringing in a third party like Banxa for KYC introduces a certain level of centralization. Some people in the community might see this as a step away from Pi Network's original vision.
So it's a question of balancing the benefits with the potential compromises. To make things super clear, could you give us a quick comparison of Pi KYC versus Banxa KYC? Head-to-head on the key points.
Sure, let's break it down. With Pi KYC, you have community validators, while Banxa KYC is handled by, well, Banxa.
Okay, so provider is the first difference. What about speed?
Pi KYC can be slower. The processing time really varies because it depends on the validators. Banxa, on the other hand, is likely to be much faster and more streamlined thanks to their dedicated resources.
Makes sense.
And cost. Pi KYC is generally free or involves a very minimal cost. Banxa KYC requires a fee.
Clear as day. And lastly, decentralization.
Pi KYC leans towards decentralization because it relies on the community. Banxa KYC is more centralized because you're relying on a third party.
That comparison really lays it all out there.
Yeah.
So stepping back a bit, what does this whole Banxa KYC thing mean for the future of Pi Network?
Well, for one, it gives people who want to get on the mainnet quickly a way to do that. If they're willing to pay the fee, they could potentially get verified much faster, which could lead to more people using the mainnet and more Pi coin transactions happening.
So it could boost adoption and get things moving faster. But what about fairness? Does this create a divide between users who can afford the fee and those who can't?
That's a really important point. It does raise some questions about equitable access. If you can't afford the Banxa fee, you might end up waiting much longer for your KYC to be approved through the original community method, and that could mean slower access to the full benefits of the mainnet.
Yeah, that's something to think about. But aside from that, are there any other potential benefits of having Banxa on board?
Definitely. Banxa's infrastructure and their experience could really improve the efficiency of the whole KYC process for a lot of users. It might even take some pressure off the community validators, letting them focus on the more complicated cases. Overall, it could lead to a smoother KYC experience for the entire network.
So even if you don't personally use Banxa, the whole system could benefit. Interesting. Do you think this move tells us anything about Pi Network's long-term strategy for KYC?
It might suggest a shift. It seems like they're trying to strike a balance between their commitment to decentralization and the need to be practical and scalable. Maybe they're leaning towards a kind of hybrid approach that uses the strengths of both community-driven efforts and established third-party services.
So adapting to the challenges of growth and finding a way to make things work makes sense. So for all the Pi users out there listening, What should they be thinking about when it comes to KYC and this new Banxa option?
The most important thing is to stay informed. Pay attention to any official announcements or updates from Pi Network about how the KYC process works and the different options available. Then, think about what's important to you. Do you want to get your KYC done as fast as possible, even if you have to pay a fee? Or is saving money more important to you, even if it means potentially waiting longer?
It's all about weighing your priorities and doing your research.
It's exactly. If you're thinking about using Banxa, make sure you understand the fees before you do anything. That information should be clearly available in the Pi Network app. And whatever you do, always be careful about protecting your account. Don't trust any messages or requests for personal information that come from outside the official Pi Network app.
Sound advice. So to wrap things up, we've taken a deep dive into KYC on Pi Network, focusing on this new Banxa option. You should have a good grasp of what it is, how it works, the pros and cons, and how it compares to the original community-based approach. Hopefully this helps you decide what's best for you when it comes to KYC.
What's really fascinating is how Pi Network, a decentralized project, is tackling this challenge of identity verification, especially as it grows so rapidly. The bank's integration brings up a crucial question for all users in the decentralized world. How do you balance the trade-offs between speed and cost, between the ideal of decentralization and the need for efficient solutions as you participate in these new and evolving digital currencies?
That's a really interesting question to consider. So as you continue on your Pi journey, think about what we've talked about today and maybe even ponder this. How might the growing use of third-party services like Banxa shape the future of decentralized networks? Food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.